Hello class, welcome to Home Ec. For today's lesson, we are testing a single vintage gadget to see if it is a good value replacement for a full set of modern kitchen appliances. Behold, the Oster Crown Regency Kitchen Center, and boy am I excited to try this out. It's the ultimate in food processing. A slice, shred, and cut for salads, casseroles, and main dishes. This mixer's a must for baking day. So, in order to test each of the functions, we are going to be using the Betty Crocker picture cookbook to make a full dinner. To test the dough hooks, we're going to be making the dinner rolls from page 98. To test the meat grinder, we are going to be making the meatloaf from page 275 and grinding our own meatloaf mix. To test the food processor, we're going to be making coleslaw on page 344. That will be to shred some cabbage and some carrots. And to test the slicing function, we'll be slicing up some celery and carrots for a cream of vegetable soup on 372. And we will also be blending that soup to test out the blending function. I also have here the ice cream maker attachment, which I am super excited to try. But that will be in a different upcoming video where I am going to put 3 different vintage ice cream makers up against each other. I have this one, I have a Kenmore in-freezer ice cream maker that I've already tried out once before, and I'm going to get a Ronco ice cream maker and put the 3 of them against each other to see which one comes out on top. All right, we have our plan of action. We are going to put this vintage gadget through its paces by making a full dinner with it, testing out the various attachments along the way. And we have our learning objective. Does this Oster Kitchen Center have a place in a modern kitchen? Does it live up to the hype that it set forth in its original advertisement? Let's head to the kitchen and get some practical hands-on experience to figure out the answer to those questions. All right, class, it's time to roll up our sleeves and get to work. At this point, we all have impeccably clean hands. We have the recipe for richer sweet dough from page 98 of the Betty Crocker cookbook, all mise en placed out, ready to mix together, and it is time to put this gadget to the test. We are starting out with 1 tablespoon of active dry yeast. Then we have a 1/4 cup of lukewarm milk going in here, 1/4 cup of sugar, and 1/2 teaspoon of table salt. So let's add in the dough hooks here. And the way you tilt this back is interesting. You just squeeze that button there and you can tilt this back and it'll stay up like that. It's kind of interesting with this particular blender, the 2 dough hooks and the 2 beaters go front to back, not side to side. So both of the dough hooks are on one side of this. The setting for kneading dough on this is the full 12, high as it goes. So I'm gonna turn our little knob all the way up. Wait a minute. Okay. Looks like it just kind of jerks like that with the dough hooks in. With that mixed together, we're going to add in a 1/4 cup of softened shortening and 1 egg. Let's mix this together. I almost feel like the beaters would be more effective at this point for mixing it all together. So what I'm going to do is switch them out for the beaters and try to use those a little bit. There's this toggle on the top of the machine. Switch it the other direction. And the beaters / dough hooks come right out. Let's try it now. Hello. Okay, beaters definitely do go faster. So we're adding in 2 1/4 to 2 1/2 cups of flour, and we're going to be doing this in 2 different additions. Okay, I really dislike the way this bowl jerks. That is unpleasant. I'm not feeling any heat coming off the motor just now. Doesn't feel like it's struggling at all, but I have had some mixers in the past blow their motor just mixing 1 thing of dough. Entry-level KitchenAid, I'm looking in your direction. So I'm letting this take a few rests now and then to keep it from getting too hot and straining too much, although it seems to be doing okay. It's just a little bit clunky with the mixing, the bowl spinning. But let's add in our 2nd cup of flour. I think I sort of always expected this to be a drawback of this design, is the bowl doesn't spin independently other than from the force of the beaters or the bread dough hooks. But it is really easy to get into the bowl, to scrape down easily without it being in danger of getting caught in anything. You can turn the bowl by hand. So it has advantages and disadvantages. All right, so the dough's come together pretty well after a couple of minutes. It just needs to be kneaded, but it's with just 2 cups of flour, it's a good consistency for me. It's tacky, but it's not overly sticky. It's actually genuinely not doing a terrible job at kneading this. It's starting to get nice gluten development. We're almost at the window painting that you need. No heat, no strain on the motor, no bad smells. So fairly happy with it so far. Okay, we've got some nice window painting. It needed a batch of dough, no problems. A little tiny bit of heat building up, but not much. It didn't seem to struggle. There's a little bit of awkwardness just from the physical structure of how this is all set up. You do have to stop, scrape, and pull some chunks off of this interior dough hook occasionally in batches, but yeah, I'm happy with it. It's did a good job. So we now want to take a bowl, just a little bit of oil in there, take our dough and shape it into a nice ball, coat it with the oil, cover it with a clean kitchen towel, and we're gonna put this to proof for an hour. I have the oven already set to proofing, so that'll be ready to go. This is a stainless steel bowl. You could run it through the dishwasher. I am not sure that these beaters can go through the dishwasher. I don't know if they're the like anodized aluminum or whatever. That gets kind of wonky if you do that. So I'm going to hand wash all of this. Now let's jump into our second recipe, the meatloaf, and we are going to be grinding our own meat, which I've actually never done before. But we have this cool, nifty little attachment to grind meat, and let's give it a try. It comes apart very easily to clean. There are several little bits and pieces to keep track of, so that might be a little bit difficult if you're not good at keeping track of things. But it is not terribly difficult to assemble, disassemble, clean. Starting with the meatloaf recipe, I have a pound of mystery beef here. The package did not say what it was. It just said beef for stew, stew beef, something like that. And it was the cheapest option they had for beef, so I got it. It was already cut into pieces, convenient enough. And that is the good thing about grinding your own meat. You can shop the sales or cheaper beef to save some money versus the ground beef. This was actually $1 a pound cheaper than the ground beef. Or you can use it to have higher quality meat if you're concerned about the quality of the ground beef, but you need to use some. It's just grinding your own meat gives you more control, and you know that it is freshly ground. It's much easier to tell how fresh the meat is when you're grinding it yourself. Grinding is on the number 12 setting as well, same as kneading. That is the highest power setting. I'm going to just start feeding chunks of beef through here and see how it comes out. Oh, there's a food pusher. I almost forgot about the food pusher. This pushes it down. Okay. Fill our little thing up with beef here. Uh-oh. Seems to be bogging down a little bit. Let's take this off and see where we're at. Let's try it again. This test has been disappointing so far, but let's keep going. What the hell? Get in there. The level of determination I have to make this work cannot be overstated, but whether it will actually work with any amount of determination is yet to be seen. I was so awful. Man, jeez. This is so crazy frustrating, but we need this meat. We don't have an option for anything else but for this to work. Okay, I cleaned up after the beef. It is now time to grind the pork. Come on, pork. I'm using tongs this time. I don't want to touch raw pork. Channeling everything I got. All right, it's not doing much better than the beef did. Okay, so when all else fails, read the instructions. I looked up a copy of the original instructions for this machine online, and it turns out there's a piece missing. There should be a cutting blade right behind the grinding disc. So right behind this thing, there's supposed to be a cutting blade here that chops the meat up before it goes through this. And boy, would that help. Let me tell you. So, okay, I should have done that. Should have done that to begin with. Let that be a lesson. Read the instructions first. You could save yourself a lot of trouble. So here's what I'm going to do, because I still got to get this meat ground. Let's try doing it in the blender. So you're going to take this whole thing off. And the blender just sits right down on top. And hopefully this isn't ill-conceived, but I'm going to put the meat into the blender. Okay, well that worked out quickly. Maybe I should have just blended the meat to begin with. Now that we have learned the hard way that you should always read the instructions, let's go ahead and mix this meatloaf together with this somewhat ground meat. We've got a pound of ground beef. We've got half a pound of ground pork. We have 2 cups of panko breadcrumbs. Any type of breadcrumbs will do. We've got 1 egg beaten going right in there. We've got 1.5 cups of milk, 4 tablespoons of minced onion, 2 teaspoons of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, 1/4 teaspoon of dry mustard, and I'm doing a 1/4 teaspoon of sage. And you know what? It just occurred to me that I am not using this machine to its full advantage. I could have ground the meat straight into the bowl, added all the ingredients, and used the beaters to mix everything together. This has a lot of cross functionality that I'm not really thinking about. So I think with more use, I'll get more accustomed to using all the cross functionality that is the real benefit of this machine. Let's go ahead and blend it all the way together from this point on. I think beyond this initial testing, I'm definitely going to have to give this machine a lot more to do, put some more effort into seeing what we can do with it. Whoa. Okay, you want to be careful it's not too high. You can see it just shoved everything up against the sides here. That's not what we want. So I turned it down lower, scrape it down and put it on its lowest setting. So I've struggled with the meat grinder. That wasn't the machine's fault. I didn't think to use it to its full potential by grinding the meat into the bowl and then mixing everything together. But again, that's not the machine's fault. That's my fault for just not being familiar with it. And that's a function of being brand new to it. That's why we test these out, right? The whole point of this video, just give it a test run and learn these things. You'll never get good at something until you just are bad at it for a little while. So I'm just gonna spread this meat evenly in the loaf pan here. And this is going to go into the oven at 350 degrees for 1.5 hours. I moved the dough to the top of the oven to finish its second proof. And it should be done in like 15 minutes or so. All right, let's clean and sanitize everything and move on to the coleslaw and the soup. Moving right along, let's get into making the coleslaw, and we will be testing out the food processor attachment. I have very high hopes for this one. Pretty simple to assemble. The top just twists into place. So you have the base here. You have this little disc that goes on top of that. Then you add one of your cutting discs on top of that. So this would be just a slice. This is the grater. And this is the French fry cut. This is a thicker slicer. So we're going to start with the grating attachment. You just set it on top like that. You just put the lid down and then twist it to snap it into place. And the whole thing just sits on top, like all the other attachments. Okay. You have a food pusher that comes with it. There are 3 different pieces, a measuring cup, and then 2 different sides. So for this very simple old-fashioned coleslaw recipe, we are going to need 1.25 cup of finely shredded cabbage. I just cut 1/4 of the cabbage out, and I'm going to shred it. Let's see how this goes. All right. I unplugged it. Okay, I'm turning the speed up. That was entirely too slow. Yeah, that seems to be working okay. I did get a little bit built up on top there. Not the end of the world. I get that with any food processor attachment. Let's turn up the power a little bit. Works great. Really works great. And now we will need 1 1/4 cups of finely cut celery. So I'm going to just put these celery pieces through there. All right, went through easy peasy. One thing that's important to note is this does have a safety feature to where you can't run it unless the lid is firmly attached, which is a big plus for a food processor. You want to make sure that it can't just, spin openly without the guard on it. There is this little doohickey right there that pushes everything down and locks it in place so that it will spin. With the cabbage and celery shredded, we are going to add into it a teaspoon of salt, 1 tablespoon of sugar, a tablespoon of vinegar, and this is 6 tablespoons of cream mixed with 1 tablespoon of mayonnaise and a teaspoon of mustard powder. Now let's test some of these other blades to cut veggies for the soup. Come on. I'm going to try this one like a julienne sort of fry cut blade. Okay, that just gave me chunks of carrot. That makes sense. These vegetables are getting boiled, so it doesn't really matter how they're cut. Let me try the slicer for the celery this time. Woo. Okay, it does get a little bit aggressive for like how far it shoots things out. So the small bowl isn't the best option for this, but the other one has the coleslaw in it in the refrigerator. So, okay, we've got our veggies cut for our soup. Gotta say, I'm very happy with the food chopper attachment. Not the best I've ever used, but it does its job and it's very functional. So now the bread has finished its second rise and we can punch this down and form it into rolls. Recipe says this will make 18 rolls, 1 1/2 dozen. I don't know about all that. I'm gonna just start cutting it into equal portions and see when they look about right. All right, I've got 16 rolls out of it. That seems about right. I'm just taking dough in each hand, cupping it like that, keeping my hands cupped on top of it, just rolling them around until they form into little balls. You want to make sure these are spaced fairly evenly. How did I get an odd one? The little odd one out will go right there. 16 rolls, and these are going into the oven at 425 for 12 to 20 minutes. Now let's get the soup done. All right, this is a very easy soup. We've got 3 tablespoons of butter melting here in a saucepan. Into that, we're adding a teaspoon of salt and 2 tablespoons of flour. Then just a little pinch of pepper. We're mixing this all together. This is the roux, which is going to serve as the thickener for our soup. You want to cook this flour just a little bit to give it some flavor. You don't got to go super dark if you don't want to. You can go very dark, but it's going to affect the color of the soup. Then, after you've cooked a little bit, you want to cut off the flame and add in 2 cups of milk. Blend that together. And I'm using 2 cups of chicken broth. Then you cut your heat back on and bring this up to a boil. Once your soup has come up to a boil, you want to add in your veggies. I'm using carrots and celery. This will make it a cream of carrot and celery soup. You can use whichever sort of vegetables make sense. You could use mushrooms. You could use potatoes to make potato soup. You could use rutabagas if you want cream of rutabaga. After cooking this for just a bit, I'm taking it off the heat. I don't want to boil all the nutrition out of the veggies. All right, it is now time for the final functionality test of the Oster Crown Regency Kitchen Center, and that is of the blender. I have high hopes for this one because Oster blenders were the main brand in the United States for the longest time. The way KitchenAid stand mixers are currently the standard, Oster blenders were once that standard. If you had a blender, chances were it was an Oster. And this whole expanded kitchen center was a little bit of a branch out from them. Okay, the glass pitcher just sits right down in there, very secure. Now let's put the lid on and start with it low setting. I don't want to go super high. Forgot to plug it in. Okay, let's pulse it. Let's give it more power. All right, I turned it all the way up to liquefy, and liquefy it is. Whoa! So let's strain this into a bowl. Blender A+. It did an amazing job. It's a nice solid glass pitcher. They don't make those anymore for whatever reason. Yeah, I knew the blender was going to be great. That's the foundation of the Oster brand is their blenders, the Osterizer. Here's where we're at. I pulled the rolls out of the oven a little bit ago. They look delicious. Got about 10 minutes left on the meatloaf. I'm going to spread some ketchup on top and put it under the broiler. The recipe doesn't say to do that, but I'm going to do it. While the meatloaf is finishing, I'm going to start setting up the table, getting ready to serve myself. And we can come back and we will finish this whole thing up with a final review of the Oster Crown Regency Kitchen Center and a taste test of these vintage dinner recipes, see how tasty they are. And here we are, a full meal made with the Oster Crown Regency Kitchen Center. And what a meal it is. This was a lot of work, but it looks delicious. I'm excited to dig in. Let's go back over how this baby performed throughout our tests. Looking at the bread, it kneaded the dough for a loaf of bread beautifully. It was kind of weird how it behaved in the mixing bowl, but mostly just different to what I'm used to, not necessarily bad. It did a great job kneading it. No complaints whatsoever. It had plenty of power. That was another main concern I had. This has 450 watts of power, which is a good amount for a mixer, but that doesn't necessarily mean it will do a good job mixing if it doesn't have the mechanical advantage to transfer that power efficiently to the mixing elements, if that makes sense. So this does a really good job of taking that 450 watts of power and using mechanical advantage at its best to transfer it into the mixing ability. It's not wasted power, I guess is how I would say it. Moving on to the food grinder, really hard to give that a fair assessment because I'm missing a piece to it. And boy, did I feel dumb when I figured that part out. So I am planning on going onto eBay and seeing if I can find that missing part. I do really like how you can turn the attachments around to where they are feeding into the bowl for like the meat grinder or the food processor. That's a super great element. So when I get all the pieces for the food grinder, I'm going to try that one out again. Moving on to the food processor, it works great. It's a food processor, and it is very easy to attach. This looks like the biggest, clunkiest hand mixer ever right now, but that's not what it is. I also liked all of the different discs for the food processor. It is not quite as good as my modern standalone KitchenAid food processor. Little pieces get caught up more than they do in the KitchenAid, but it's perfectly serviceable. And the convenience factor of just being able to switch things out really is a point in its favor. Moving on to testing out the blender, how easy is that to just switch out into the blender? This works as well as my current KitchenAid blender. So yeah, absolutely. It's got this really nice glass container, blends beautifully. Could not complain, wonderful. So there are lots of pros to this. Very, very convenient to switch out multiple functions. I think I will be doing that in the future, just switching between different functions all in one unit. Very, very space saving. If you live in a tiny house, if you live in like an RV, anywhere where you have to be conscientious of how much space you're using, this is a great option. It's genuinely a great option. It's a pretty small profile. It doesn't take up a lot of counter space, but it can be stored under counters very easily. And it's got another big bonus. And that's the height level. Even fully assembled, it's not terribly tall, so it could slide under a lot of short shelves. But you take this piece off, and it's very, very low profile. You could stick that into a very short shelf. There are a lot of pieces to keep a track of, but compared to a full set of kitchen appliances, it's not very much. It's got a lot of power, definitely all the power you need for most home applications. I'm very happy with it. A couple of cons is the bowls. If you can find some extra bowls, that might be useful. So you can switch between functions without having to stop and clean the bowl each time. So if I wanted to go from kneading dough to grinding meat to shredding veggies all into the bowl right here, I would have to have different bowls for all of that. And I only have one big bowl, one small bowl. So that's a little bit of a downside to it. The mixing bowl is kind of weird how it mixes things. You just got to work with it. But it does spin through just force of the spinning motion. I don't know how to describe it. The force of the beater spinning causes the bowl to spin. But you can use that to manipulate it, move the bowl around. So that actually saves you a little bit of scraping. You just got to get used to using it, I guess. All in all, yeah, 2 thumbs up. I highly recommend it. I wasn't sure if I was going to keep this around. I absolutely am, and I will probably be using it in most of my cooking videos because it's just one appliance I can bring out, put on my table, and have multiple functions for it. Just switch out the different attachments. I don't have to have 5 different appliances out, switching out the cords and everything. It's going to be very helpful for me. So I will find some extra bowls, and I will find the missing grinder piece as God as my witness. So if there's anything else you want me to test with this, cakes, anything like that, cakes, cookies, there's plenty of other tests you can do. Let me know. Give me a comment down below to let me know what else you'd like me to test out with this machine, because it's definitely going to be around for a while. So our main learning objective, is this a good value replacement to a full set of modern kitchen appliances? Well, yes, it absolutely will replace a full set of modern kitchen appliances, but is it a good value? I found this one for $200, which is on the high end. You can find them much cheaper, but they are an almond colored plastic, like this colored here. The entire machine, the entire set is that plastic. For the chrome with the stainless steel bowl, very difficult to find. It was much more expensive to get a full set, so I paid $200 for it. I would say anywhere from $150 to $200 is probably a really good price for a full set of this, no matter which finish it is, because you're replacing a stand mixer, a food processor, a blender, and a meat grinder. And it's a really good stand mixer. It has a lot of power, and that alone is really worth it. When I went looking for stand mixers a few years ago, I ended up buying a Bosch because I needed one that had a low height profile that would fit under my kitchen cabinets when I'm using it and would fit under a narrow shelf, a short shelf, when it had to be put away. And the Bosch had the low enough profile for me to be able to do that, so I had to spend a little bit extra to get that. If I had thought of this, if I had known about this, it would have solved my problems at a much lower price point with a lot more functionality. Just something to think about. So the answer is yes, this is absolutely a good value replacement to a full set of kitchen appliances. I would recommend getting one. I enjoyed it. But now it is time to dig into eating. So give myself a roll here. They came out so tiny and cute, didn't they? This is all very simple, nutritious food. It was cheap to make. None of it was difficult to make, but all in all, it was a lot of work. Oh, that soup's delicious. A little bit over-salted. I would wait to put salt in until after you have tasted it with your broth, if you have salted broth. But it's tasty. I really like the combination of celery and carrots. They balance each other's flavor out really well. Feels wholesome. Let's give the roll a bite here. This is just a very nice, light, fluffy bread. It's perfect. It's quintessential homemade bread. It was very easy to make, very tasty to eat. Especially kneading the bread in this mixer, it was easy as can be. Definitely recommend. Moving on, let's try the slaw. Again, a very, very simple slaw. Cabbage, celery, mayonnaise, cream, a little bit of seasoning, and some vinegar. Couldn't be more basic than that. The food processor did a really good job of getting a nice, finely shredded cabbage. And Now it's time to try the meatloaf. This was a very simple, classic American meatloaf recipe. Nothing fancy, nothing complicated. Let's give the coleslaw a try first. Delicious. Actually, one of my favorite coleslaws I've ever tried. Yeah, very basic coleslaw recipe, very delicious. And now for the meatloaf. It's very tender, very flavorful, not overly complicated, but it's basic and delicious. This is all just simple, delicious food, and I couldn't be happier with it. All of these are recipes I would make again, I recommend, and none of them were complicated or expensive to make. So that is all for today's class. We have made ourselves a full meal using a single vintage appliance. How cool is that? I hope that you will come back for the next class to see what we get up to. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the future.